get started. Yeah, I'm waiting for the cameraman to get ready. If we could call the meeting to order, please. Mr. Suarez is on his way, but we'll go ahead and get started for the camera crew folks' sake here. If we could stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You have the minutes in your package. If we could have a motion for approval. Second, all in favor? Public input. I'm assuming Neil's on the, we'll get the list here, but.
I just don't think you
sure.
received it.
No, she's sure, just doing public input. First one, she's got the list here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Neil Costantino, 708 South Davis Boulevard in Tampa. I was in the military, and people say thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for your service. So now we're on the same level. I'm writing a book. I finished writing a book about my flying, my experiences in Vietnam, but I'm writing another book, and it's kind of an interesting thing because the title is What If? That's the title of the book. And one of the stories will be about HART. What if our bus system was like New York City, where they have 5 boroughs and 1 bus system? So what if we had 5 counties and 1 bus system? So that's the theme of the story that I'll write. So it's interesting because what we're doing today plays out in the story. People say to me, Neil, you're a Don Quixote. We all know Don Quixote, it's a great book. But I was thinking of the title for the book. It could be called Don Quixote Crosses the Rubicon. Okay? Don Quixote Crosses the Rubicon. And let me tell you, people like activists call us, or gadflies, some people call it. I don't like that word. I'm a think tank guy, I'm not a gadfly guy. But anyway, crossing the Rubicon, let me tell you why Don Quixote crossed the Rubicon, okay? And why does he charge windmills? Well, because he gets a charge out of it, okay? He feels he's charged to do it, just like you're charged to run what I would call a good system, which can be a lot better if we consolidate them. So Don Quixote and charging windmills, I'm charging you today to try to look at some of the things that we've been talking about. It's going to go on the public record, and that's a good thing. That's how our democracy works. So our manifesto, if you want to call it that, as we cross the Rubicon, is consolidation, okay? And the purpose for consolidation is to sub-franchise, okay? You come together, you form a franchise, and then you let the little guy run the circulators, okay? The little guy, all he wants to do is run the circulators. He doesn't want to do fare box. He doesn't want to do training according to DOT standards. He doesn't want to do all the other things that you all do. All he wants to do is run the system. So if you franchise, that can happen. Also, I wanted to share with you that Checkbook USA, using the Google Glass and the cloud, which is technology that has arrived about a year ago. And what we're saying is that if everything HART does, and the city of Tampa does, and the city of Tallahassee does, and the county of Leon County does, if all that goes Google Glass to the cloud, then we can all see how money is spent in our government. It's an incredible idea. And it could start right here, and that's a good place to start. The other thing I'm asking your group, because you're You wouldn't be here if you weren't intelligent,
Mr.
smart,
Constantine?
well-educated.
I believe that's the time for his 3 minutes. Is that correct, Lena? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, sir, I
Well,
apologize. Thank you very
See you
much
next
for appearing.
week.
Thank you.
Next meeting.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I apologize, but we didn't have our list up here before. I have Sharon Calvert that would like to speak before us. Ms. Calvert, our apologies that we didn't have our list up here first.
Problem. I forgot
Welcome.
my printout, so I'll use my phone.
Okay.
Sharon Calvert, I live in East Florida. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. First, I applaud this board for all your hard work and due diligence. I know the time and effort you put into your position on the board, the seriousness you take your position to ensure you have the right information, ask the appropriate questions, and deliberate to make the right decisions. This board has a lot of knowledge and expertise that's invaluable. That said, before the ferry presentation is made, I address this question to the county commissioners on the board. Do you know if the federal grant for the ferry has been awarded, and how much is the grant for? And regardless of whether you know the answers, hopefully you do, the process worked. If the goal is to get transportation dollars to the county, then the process for the ferry grant worked. As I understand, the ferry grant is for the county, and HART is only a pass-through agency. Therefore, HART doesn't need to be restructured to get the federal funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calvert. Kevin Thurman is the next speaker listed. Mr. Thurman.
So we're all using phones these days. It's the modern age. Kevin Thurman, Executive Director of Connect Tampa Bay. I'm here actually to kind of talk about something that's on the agenda and then something that you all know will be on the agenda. What I want to talk about a little bit is about your budget. Every year you guys done a Herculean job trying to squeeze the most out of every single dollar. But the real reality is the pressure on the system is growing larger. We have an aging fleet that needs service, and we have more and more riders demanding service every single day. Every single time new service is out there, more people ride it. You can see it in the back of your reports every single time you sit here each month. And this board's #1 goal is to make sure that people who need transit, and honestly, yes, people who want to use transit as an alternative, be able to do it. And so as you look towards what you're going to do in this next budget year, and also as you look forward what you're going to do as a board and what you're going to work with county commissioners to do as you form into, the key is to figure out how to make sure that mass transit of all types, all shapes and sizes, some that we don't even offer today, more circulators and everything else that people are asking for, high capacity transit that we don't have on the road today. When you look at what you're going to do, it is the job of this board, sitting right now over the next few months, to make sure that whatever HART becomes in the future, whatever it grows into in some great way, protects and makes sure that the resources increase to meet that demand, and that is protected, so that we don't look to another day and we don't see something like what happens in Houston, when somebody decides, oh, let's not do this bus rapid transit project because we need to widen this road out here. And that's the one thing we can do. If we protect that and we do that, then HART as an agency will be able to meet that demand, continue to get the most out of every dollar as it does today, and do great work. And so I hope that you guys will do that as an organization takes on more duties and looks to get that economic development, looks to get those choice riders in. Connect Tampa Bay and its members really want to make sure that transit gets the more resources it needs, not the less.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. I have no one else listed on our sheet up here. Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak about anything on the agenda currently? I see no one. Okay, let's go on to our presentations. Our first presentation was supposed to be Tampa Bay Passenger Ferry Project. We were made aware last week of an issue that both the county attorney had contacted our staff, and Catherine, if you'd like to just weigh in right now on that.
Yes, thank you. We spoke with county staff late last week, and there have been some concerns raised by Fish and Wildlife and also the state conservation groups, which are putting a pause on the ferry process at this time. So rather than bring a presentation that would change and have to come back for subsequent presentation, to ferry presentations off the agenda till further notice.
Okay. And part of the, hang on a second, Ms. Madden, and part of the, we did not get a chance to see this in committee, primarily because of the death of Mr. Taranchik's mom. So none of us have seen it yet. I would suggest that we take it back to committee when it does come up again. Ms. Madden, you had a question.
I just had a comment. I think we, and I promise I won't interfere with the process. I just, as a comment, we did get an emailed copy of the presentation, and included as a part of that presentation was a page, a graphic, with some pretty striking demographic information for population growth projections in South Hillsborough County. And I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, and I think what would be great is that make sure that that is part of the presentation that's given to the committee when it comes back up. And I hope by next month, and we'll communicate directly with the county to make sure whatever issues that come up, we can bring it all up at committee. Any other questions or comments about the removal of this particular presentation? I see no one. Okay, now, the big deal, Mr. Jeff Seward. Give us our proposed budget.
It is. Good morning. Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer for HART.
I'm sorry? Oh. Oh, it was changed. I have an old agenda in front of me. Let's see, let me see that, Steve. Oh, okay. I'd like to get a motion to approve the proclamation for National Dump the Pump Day for June 19th of 2014. Move. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Davin, for getting me on my agenda, on the right agenda. Go ahead, Jeff.
Time of the year that we're discussing the proposed budget for FY15. I had the opportunity to present a proposed budget presentation to the Finance, Governance, and Administration Committee last month. Based on some conversations and discussions during that meeting, we have revised the presentation that you'll be seeing today with a little more detail and a little bit more discussion on our long-term fiscal sustainability strategy. But before that, get into our budget goals and guidance that were provided to the organization as that budget was developed. Now I'll move quickly through these slides as we have discussed these over the last couple of months. It's important to remember as you review this today what the foundational elements for the budget development for 15 were. And as always, each year, our primary goal is to maintain current service levels. Not decrease, but to maintain and enhance as necessary based on the transit development plan as our leaping off point for each year. As you know, we made the commitment last year to you that we would use the transit development plan for its true intention of a long-range strategic development plan, tie it to the annual budget development, and again, this year we are using the TDP for that purpose. We're also looking at continued long-term fiscal sustainability, ensuring that although we are adding enhanced service, enhanced product development, such as One Bus Away, our fare box project, and we are looking at relieving some of the internal employee constriction that we've had over the last few years that has increased individual workloads. We are still looking at the long term. We're still looking at being fiscally prudent and putting money away in fund balance for future endeavors. And then, of course, prepare hard for future growth. We're all very much aware of discussions that are going on right now throughout the region, and we want to ensure that the organization is developed into one that has a firm financial foundation with service to the community. So key drivers and assumptions. Again, we talked about incremental growth in operating revenue. We are seeing an increase in ad valorem this year, which I'll get to in detail later on in the presentation. We are seeing bus ridership starting to plateau. You'll see that in our ridership projections for next year, where we've seen the last few years of steady increases in ridership. We are now starting to see those numbers start to flatten out. Stagnant growth in capital funding. The capital budget you'll see today is still evolving, but it does represent the fact that capital funding and availability of funding for our capital program is slowly growing stagnant. Eyes on Washington. We very much are paying attention to the reauthorization of MAP 21, or whatever iteration of MAP 21 will come out. As you know, our federal formula funding is a huge component of our operating budget at present, although we are looking at over the next 5 to 10 years of recalibrating that and pushing it back over to capital. We have substantial collective bargaining obligations, which we'll talk about in more detail later as well. And then the non-bargaining side of the house, ensuring that there's parity and to stop professional attrition as we move forward. The organization was asked to develop scenarios again. This is a process that we've used over the last 2 years to really hone in and reduce internal costs and expenditures to ensure that we focus on putting service on the street and reducing the cost of actually supporting that service. The organization was asked to present scenarios for 2%, 3%, and 4%. We had a target of between $500,000 to $1 million of internal cost reductions for this year. Although the last couple of years we have really focused on the level of service reduction scenarios, this is the first year that we've allowed level of service scenarios and requests from the organization to come to the executive team for consideration. There were 3 criteria, though, that were used to evaluate whether or not these LOSs would be added into the budget. And there are actually 3 categories. The first category is making HART an employer of choice. We wanted to be able to create programs and create incentive packages or compensation packages that we would be able to retain talent across the organization. That being said, we're putting some investment. The proposed budget that you see today has expanded investments in training and addressing that constriction and staff workload that I mentioned previously by adding some new positions into the mix to be able to alleviate those limitations that we have now. The second scenario is reinvestment of new revenues. Although these revenues on an individual scale are small, we don't consider any new revenue coming into HART to be all that small. We want to be able to use it, we want to be able to leverage it. We have the Megabus, we have CNG rebates, we have Career Source Tampa Bay. These are specific new revenue sources that are coming into the organization that we have actually earmarked based on the purpose of those revenues. So for instance, with the Megabus revenue we'll be receiving over the next 5 years, we will be reinvesting that into the MTC facility. Although it's not a lot of money, it is money to be able to get some aesthetic things done, to do some compliance issues, and make it a more pleasing environment for our patrons. Our CNG rebates, which we are now on the cusp of getting 5 of them from the state of Florida. This program now runs through the end of June, which is the end of the state fiscal year. We're hoping that it's renewed for next year. But we are taking advantage of it. And for every van that we get in, we're taking advantage of that rebate. And that money, when it comes in, is going to be recycled and reinvested back into our bus purchase program. Our Career Source Tampa Bay, for every unemployed individual in the Tampa Bay region collecting unemployment, if we hire them, Career Source Tampa Bay provides us a stipend back. And it's small, but it's small enough or large enough that we're actually reinvesting it back into our staff training programs. So that category, reinvestment of new revenues. The third, forward-thinking programs. This is us looking at what we want to do in the future, what other organizations are doing across the region and the country. We're looking at commuter programs with Tampa Bay employers. We're looking at a school board fare pilot program, which we've discussed and will be coming to you shortly for review. A pilot program with Hillsborough Community College to be able to get those students on the buses. Expansion of our retail relationships, looking at our CVS's and Walgreens and so on, and really looking to provide the ability for patrons to get access to our fare media, regardless of what that fare media is now or in the future, in a much more ready fashion. And then we're looking at smart cards and e-ticketing opportunities. Last week, we had a working meeting with the 2 primary organizations in the Farebox Regional Working Group, and that would be us and PSTA, along with a consultant who's helping us with our second solicitation. And we are looking heavily at the ability of e-ticketing opportunities in the future, and the ability to have smart cards, and the smart cards that you take off of a rack at the CVS as you're checking out, scan the card, you load it, you go on the website, you put your information on it, and now you have a reloadable card that's able to be used throughout the region and just not on HART. So forward-thinking programs and investment. So our cost-saving measures, we had a target of between $500,000 and $1 million. We were able to achieve $725,357 worth of savings. This is the second consecutive year of LOS internal reductions. In FY14, we were able to save $1.2 million of reducing internal expenditures. So over a 2-year period, we're looking at about a $2 million reduction of costs internally, where we want to reinvest that either back into service or having it drop the fund balance for the future. Specifically, we realigned sources within departments. If we had a vacant position that was needed elsewhere, we simply reclassified that instead of adding a position, or we eliminated vacant positions that were no longer needed, and we were able to either wrap those jobs into one or redefine what that job was. Basic reduction in expenditures and travel, training, or travel, printing, advertising, office supplies, the small things, but they do add up. One thing that we truly were able to do this year was to take a real hard look at what we have historically budgeted and what we have historically spent as actuals at year end, and we were able to true those up. As most government agencies, there is a tendency to budget up when preparing budgets from internal staff. We were able to go back and really recalibrate those and align them to what we have actually been spending over the last few years for specific functions, and we were able to lower our internal costs by $725,000. So what do we want to do with that money, or what are we proposing in the budget? We're going to reinvest that by adding $1.1 million of enhancements to current non-peak hour service. Again, this is pursuant to the Transit Development Plan status quo for FY15. This is a 2.3% increase in service for next year at 19.4 thousand hours. This is the second consecutive year of service enhancements, just as with reductions in internal expenditures. In FY14, we added $1.2 million of service and another 16,000 hours of service for 8 routes. Listed in this slide, you'll see the routes that are being enhanced for next year. I won't go into each of those. But again, this is the second year that we were able to add service, annual service, to the budget. So what does all that mean at a high level? The FY15 proposed operating and capital budget is a balanced budget at $85.8 million. That's $742,000 less than the 14 amended. The proposed operating budget is $66 million, $2.3 million higher than the FY14 amended. And the FY capital proposed budget is $19.7 million, which is $3 million less than the FY14 amended budget. And we'll talk about that capital program in detail towards the end of the presentation. Just to highlight an overview of our historic budgets. Over the last 7 years, we have grown our operating budget by 1.5%, just a little over 1.5%. But that does take into account the times where it was very lean or flat based on ad valorem dipping, just for historical reference. So the FY15 proposed budget, how it's broken out, our bus operations, obviously the largest component of our operating budget at $59 million, paratransit at 5.4, streetcar at 1.5. The streetcar budget, of all the operating components within this budget, the streetcar budget is the one operating component that is flat over the prior year. And as we mature that budget with the THS board, we'll be bringing back some revised numbers to you later this summer. And then our capital projects at $19.7 million. So let's talk about revenues. Ad valorem, obviously, our largest revenue source for our operating side of the house. And passenger fares, our formula grant, and again, that isn't our entire formula grant. Our entire formula grant is $12 million. This is the piece of it that actually goes to operating. Other grants and other revenues. I'd like to talk to you in detail about some of these specific. This is the format that we used last summer for the budget. And it allows us to dig into each of the line items for both revenues and expenditures at a high level in more detail. So for property taxes and ad valorem, we have budgeted $30.6 million. That's $891,000 more than the FY14 budget. That is based on a 3% estimated valuation, which we always use in our models for conservative budgeting, for planning. However, our preliminary property values came in over the last week, and we're looking at a 5.59% increase in property values. That would be an additional $769,000 worth of revenue coming into the budget, which will be reflected when we bring forward the millage calculations in July. But again, the budget you see today was based on the 3% since it's been developed over the last 2 months. This is also assuming that our millage rate will stay constant at a 0.5, a millage level. And then our final valuation of property is due on July 1st. And again, we will amend all of these numbers appropriately as we move forward with the millage setting in the middle of July. A recap of our millage history: since FY12, millage has been at the charter cap of 0.5. This is the history of our millage and the percent change of each year based on property valuation. Again, the FY15, which is obviously our proposed, it's a 3% growth rate due to the fact that that's what we're using. Last year, we came in at a 5.43% increase in ad valorem, or property values. Again, we're looking at 5.59 going into the summer. A graphic that we've brought forward to the board a couple of years ago. You're familiar with this. A comparison of our property tax revenue based on overall ridership. Even with the increases in property values that we have had and we anticipate having, our ridership is still far out exceeding what our revenues are coming in as far as our ad valorem. And this is important as we move forward when we talk about specifically our fund balance development and work moving forward. Our fares and passes, we're looking at $16.5 million for FY15. That's $381,000 over FY14. For bus and flex, we're looking at an increase of $452,000. That's based on a 1.3% increase in ridership, and that's based on current year projections. What we do typically in the budget cycle is we start the process very, very early, sometimes in December and January, where we're asking our service planning folks for the projections of the following full year's amount of ridership. That is almost 2 years ahead of time. So what we do as we move into the budget is we look at where we are, irrespective of what we budgeted in the current fiscal year for ridership. We look at where we are at the given time as we develop the budget of what that year's actual ridership is and readjust next year's estimate based on where we are this year. So based on where we are this year, it looks as if we will only have a 1.3% growth rate in ridership for next year as anticipatory. Paratransit is still a steadily growing service. We're looking at a 5% increase in ridership, and that's based on where we are again this year with that amount coming forward. Streetcar, we're looking at a $115,000 lower amount of revenue coming in based on a 1% decrease in overall ridership. And that is a combination of prior year expectations not being met and where we are actually this year for ridership. So we continuously see that steady decline. Operating grants are $534,000 less than FY14. This is a net number. We have lost our JART grant funding for next year. That's really an $800,000 loss, but we've netted a few increases. So the loss really is only $534,000. I say only. It is substantial. That has to get picked up in the operating budget, but we are able to mitigate that. Our federal formula, again, this $10.6 million number does not represent the formula in its entirety. That's $12 million. This is the amount goes into operating. And this is the graphic that we've shown continuously now, where our hopes are that we will start the recalibration process. Actually, we're in the process now of recalibrating and slowly starting to move that money back to capital as our operating revenues increase. But we feel we want full recalibration by the FY20, FY21 timeframe. So overall revenue, $1.5 million increase over FY14, increase in ad valorem, an increase in fares and passes, and then minimal increases in ridership. Our expenditures. Expenditures, just as bus operations is our major component of our operating component, employee costs are our biggest expenditure item within our budget, at $46.2 million. Fuels, materials, and supplies, $10.8 million. It's important to note that we are still reaping the benefits of our fuel consortium and of our ability to contract very, very good diesel fuel rates. We are anticipating keeping our fuel purchase costs flat for FY14 as far as the cost per gallon is concerned. And this also includes a small amount of CNG that we'll be purchasing over the next year as we move our buses and vans to compressed natural gas. Our expenditure overview, $2.3 million increase over FY14, which is a 3.7% growth rate. Before I get into details on the expenditures, I want to make a note about the fact of a zero deficit. We did use $478,000 out of fund balance strictly for balancing the budget that you see before you today. This will not stay that way, and when we get to the fund balance discussion, I'll be very happy to report growth in that area. But again, this is only for balancing purposes. As we true up the budget over the next 60 days, we feel very confident that we will actually have an overage that will add to our fund balance going into FY16 at the end of 15. So our expenditure overview, maintain current bus and paratransit service levels, addition of over 19,000 hours of service. We have bargaining step increases and performance bonuses included in the expenditures, a non-bargaining cost of living wage adjustments, which I'll get into the details of each of these, that was asked for during the FGA meeting on the next slide. We have an anticipated 5% increase in healthcare costs. That's now looking like we will probably bump that to 10 or 11%, but again, we are able to mitigate that. Funding for the following activities, CNG operations and...
Could you repeat that last point you just made? About the healthcare costs increase?
We budgeted a 5%, we were to budget a 5% increase in healthcare costs. After an evaluation of our current claim activity and getting ready for our actuarial report, which actually doesn't occur until after you will have already adopted the budget, we're taking a conservative approach and looking at an 11%, 10 to 11% increase in healthcare costs over FY14.
And that's based on the consultant's recommendation to you that it should be at that amount, or is that just your, for purposes of?
Our purposes.
Okay, all right.
And looking at claim activity from Cigna and what we have had over the last couple of years.
Terrific, thank you.
We're also able to fund the following activities. 100% CNG operations and maintenance, going full bore with our fueling station. One bus away, maintenance and support. Now that we have that valuable tool, we need to support it, we need to maintain it, and we need to enhance it. Televising of all board of director meetings. That is now inserted into the budget for next year as well. A bus rodeo, upgrades to operator training manuals, which over time have, shall we say, become dated. We're going to upgrade those for our new operators. Improvements for customer service and van operations. Everything from customer service support to putting brand new GPS tools on the paratransit vans, replacing those, that technology. All of that is included in the budget. And then a nominal use of fund balance, again, we will negate that in the final budget, but we did it simply for balancing purposes. So the key expenditure highlight for this go-around we wanted to discuss was the salary and fringe benefit expenditures, as this came up as a discussion item at the FGA. I wanted to go through each of the increases that we have budgeted with a little bit of discussion around those. First, the contractual step increases for the bargaining units that have been budgeted for FY15. The ATU total is $551,509 for FY15. That's an average step increase per employee of $1,599 annually. The Teamster total budgeted for next year is $30,171, and that's an average step increase of $2,011. Contractual performance bonuses for the ATU, that's $250 per ATU employee. If all KPIs are met, we are assuming that we will meet and achieve those goals, so we have budgeted the full amount, or will have budgeted the full amount as we move forward in the summer. A cost of living adjustment of 3% for our non-bargaining employees, that's $229,707 budgeted in FY15, at an average increase of $1,823 per employee annually. We have also added a net of 18.87 FTEs, which includes operators for this enhanced service over the year, additional mechanics to support not only our current technologies, but our CNG fleet as it starts to replace our current diesel fleet, maintenance of our facilities and our infrastructure, and then supporting non-bargaining staff to be able to support the work that we're doing, such as service planning and so forth. Increase in benefits cost due to the addition of our new positions. So we're adding 18.87 net FTEs. That comes with an increase of benefits as well, and that is all included in this year's proposed budget. The position breakdown, our ATU employees, we have 628, makes up 78% of our workforce. As Teamsters, we have 47, which makes up 6%, and our non-bargaining at 126.12 at 16%. Talk a little bit about our employee history over time. This is our ATU position history. It shows our continued commitment of getting operators in-house as we replace those that leave or enhance service that's required of more operators. Our non-bargaining and Teamster positions, relatively staying flat with very moderate growth over the last few years. We will continue to see that as we move forward with our FY 15, 16, and 17 planning as well. The position breakdown, the same that you saw on the pie chart, with just an amount of variance per year. We're looking at adding 14 ATU positions, no Teamsters, non-bargaining 4.87 positions of a total of 18.87 positions, again for FY 15 that are in the proposed budget. Moving to the capital budget, I'm going to make a couple caveats with these numbers that you're going to see, just as I did with FGA. This budget is evolving. We have a finite amount of money. We have a finite amount of staff and time and resources to be able to undergo an expansive capital improvement program. So we are evaluating and prioritizing all of the capital projects that we have before us, that have come before the board, that we have discussed with you. And at the major projects and legislative committee meeting this month, we will have a complete proposed capital program for FY15, which will then be woven into the budget presentation for July for the full board. One component of the capital revenue, and this was the first year that I've been here, that you don't see a county sliver on this pie. We have fulfilled all obligations under the county agreement for the CIT funding, and we can report to you today that we are going to uncollect $1.8 million of that funding, which will actually go back to the county for its use in its CIP program. So again, it's typically you see federal grants and you see the county grant as two large components of this pie. We now have our federal grants as our major component of our capital program. And of that federal grant, $19 million, a good chunk of that, almost $11 million, is for fleet replacement. Vehicles and maintenance, 11.7. That includes vehicles and major components, again, being funded by our federal grant programs. This list, again, is being prioritized and reevaluated based on a couple of criteria. The majority of these projects are funded. We have the ability to fund them. It's the ability to get them completed in one fiscal year with the resources we have available to us. We want to be able to prioritize these projects and bring back our prioritized list to the board for discussion. Right now, bus and van acquisition and maintenance tops out the biggest component of our CIP program for next year. We're looking at a facility asset assessment. We had mentioned this prior to you, where before we can start dedicating funds to specific facility enhancements, such as new roof replacements or facility upgrades, we really want someone to come in and give us a full assessment and a life cycle of our facilities so we can budget out years for these programs. Our basic transit infrastructure is fully funded. We feel very strongly that we will have a very robust program over the next year that we will provide details to you in the upcoming budget discussions. We want to finalize and finish the work that was not completed at MTC 50, which is the Metro Rapid canopy, or the Metro Rapid stops at the north side of the MTC. We were unable to complete that by the expiration of the funding by the county due to permitting issues. But we do feel confident that we will be able to find the funding for that within our current CIP and get that done so it is 100% complete. The e-board build-out, the last 2 years we've talked about the needs of this building. We're taking a couple steps back and really assessing what needs to be done with this building to increase its asset value and longevity instead of just what we would like to see for aesthetically pleasing surroundings. We want to make sure that any investment in this facility elongates its life cycle. Security projects, part of the federal formula funding, requires us to spend money on security issues. We are spending money on lighting and closed circuit television on our buses. And we're going to do some, it may seem like aesthetics, but these are some very necessary efforts to our operating staff to be able to provide the proper break rooms and restroom facilities at our facilities that currently don't have one or the other. We want to be able to take care of these amenities moving into fiscal year 15 to be able to provide some spaces so our workers, our operators can take some downtime. So we're going to work on those. So again, the CIP program is fully in development still. We're working forward over the next couple of weeks specifically of really prioritizing what we feel comfortable telling you that we would be able to get done over the next year. So the interim CEO's recommended proposed FY15 budget. Operating expenditures of $66 million, capital expenditures of $19 million. And again, the proposed budget provides a savings of $725,000 through LOS cost savings. We're adding 19,000 plus hours of enhancements to current service. We're addressing employee needs with bargaining steps, performance bonuses, and non-bargaining increases. We're funding new positions and our continued funding of special projects, and a continued emphasis on out-year fiscal sustainability. Now, it's with this last line I wanted to spend a couple of minutes and a couple of slides talking to you about fund balance and about HART's commitment and your policy on what is required to move forward each year as far as fund balance designations are occurred. Back in 2012, we presented to you an overview of required designations by GASB. And although we are not required by GASB or by any mandate to have specific designations, we brought forward to you a series of recommendations that we would like to do, and we have implemented them. First and foremost, we have a disaster cash flow designation. Now, by HART board policy, this existed already, but we wanted to make it a true designation. By HART board policy, we are required to have a 90-day or 3-month operating reserve each year, calculated on the end of the year's closing for the next fiscal year. Although GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, recommends only 2 months of an operating budget, the majority of large organizations keep a 90-day reserve, cash reserve on hand. We do that, and we have done that, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We also have a risk designation. Each year, we have an actuarial study. This year, we're including a healthcare component, self-insured. In the past, we didn't set aside a true actuarial stated reserve for healthcare. We are going to do that this year with the funding that we have, the fund balance that we have available, to ensure that we do have the money in case of any catastrophic event. We also have a capital contingency designation. Many of our grants require a local match. This is simply that designation of fund balance that we use to put the match aside. One, in case we actually do use it and need it. And two, if we don't use it, it simply drops back to fund balance each year. But this is a commitment to show mainly those that provide us grants that we have a commitment of meeting that match and setting that money aside. And then, this is actually my favorite part of the fund balance, is the unassigned part of the fund balance, meaning that this is fully free and available funding to be used at the discretion of the board. So, where are we with fund balance? With our fund balance management, through FY12 through the present, we have steadily grown fund balance. We, each year, have had our 90-day reserve obligation fulfilled, fully funded. We had our risk and self-insurance actuarial requirement fully funded. And we have had our capital contingency fully funded as needed. There's no requirement set to what that contingency would be, but whatever the amount is that we need as a match, that's the amount that we designate. So we've been able, over the last 3 years, to grow fund balance by adding additional 16,000 hours of service this year, 19,000 hours of service last year, 2 straight years of investing in the HART workforce, opening an operation in the Metro Rapid North-South BRT, our compressed natural gas facility. We've established one bus away. We're working towards our regional fare boxes and community cooperative pilot programs, all while still being able to grow our fund balance. That's something that staff is very proud of, and we want to continue that long-term fiscal sustainability outlook by ensuring that while we do add enhanced service, and we do build the infrastructure required to support that service, that this bar never goes down unless so directed by the board. So each year we will work very hard to not only cut costs, provide service, but add to the fund balance moving forward. So at a time when we may need a one-time infusion of money for a one-time investment, that money is readily available for us to utilize. So the 5-year look ahead, how do we look? This 5-year look ahead represents the entire inclusion of the status quo transit development plan. Although it does show the out-year shortfalls, this is based on very, very conservative revenue estimates. It does include a fare increase starting at FY16, which we would talk about. This is just for modeling purposes. We begin formula calibration steadily in FY16. You'll notice that formula money dropping from 10.6 to 9.7 to 8.7 to 7.8. That starts our recalibration of shifting that money over to operating. Expenditure growth includes, again, the TDP status quo enhancements, which we'll be bringing back a draft TDP for you in the coming month. One key caveat with this 5-year outlook. This 5-year outlook is solely based on the HART model of today. If we were to provide service outside of our charter or outside of our scope, we would absolutely need an infusion of additional revenues. This model supports the model that we have today. And it's important to be able to really look at that in the 5-year look ahead. This is the model of service as it is today and as it is represented in the status quo TDP. So next steps. Before you today in an action item is this proposed budget that goes to our charter governing bodies. Final property values will be here on July 1st, and we will true up the revenues at that time. On July 21st, you will set our tentative millage and tentative budget. In August, the final tentative budget will go to the FGA for final discussion prior to the September public hearings, which we are in the process of scheduling now. And on October the 1st, we will begin anew at preparing for the FY16 budget. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions right now of Jeff about the budget? Mr. Sharp?
First, I think the presentation was excellent, and I would hope that you would take this message out to the community so they have an opportunity to learn the facts. So I don't know, do you do any public speaking beyond presentations to this board and to the county board? Do you go to to civic associations and such?
I have not yet, no.
I would strongly encourage our interim director and you to go out into the community and have a public dialogue well in advance of any discussion of a referendum. I think that when citizens have an opportunity to hear both of you, they'll be, as they always are, impressed with your presentation and how you come across, but I also think they will be very impressed by the facts. I was looking at the numbers, a budget of of 1 million, approximately less than 2014, and approximately $36 million less than 2009, and you're still showing an increase, although you're going to see a plateau in ridership. Let's discuss the plateau in ridership. The county conducted a poll, a survey of some sort. Not everyone's happy with the survey, but let's say they did do a survey and they talked to a number of respondents. And what struck me was approximately 70%, I'm just going on memory, indicating that they had not ever used transit. So if we're going to be seeing a plateauing, perhaps what we're seeing is a plateauing of the dependent riders. So if we're looking out at our market opportunity, where would our market opportunity be? Choice riders.
And we are in the process right now. Ms. Egan has directed several pilot programs with some community associations and partnerships. And with some of those, particularly the Sun City Center pilot program, we have seen an increase ridership on routes that we typically would never see that type of increases in ridership.
What drove the increase? What do you think?
Well, a couple of things. The reduced fare structure that we've offered them, but two, that reduced fare structure coupled with those that may not have even known the proximity and the connectivity that was available to them from those areas. So we're attributing it to one, the fare decrease, and the fact that we have some people experimenting out there with this with public transit that haven't done it before. And we're going to explore that a little more over the next couple of months to really see, we're seeing this growth in ridership outside of season, which for that area is something we're excited about.
I would ask that as we're looking at what we're planning for the future, I mean, what stands out is the 5-year look ahead, and in 2017 there's a deficit with the status quo. I've never been satisfied with the status quo. I would hope that what we would see is an increase in our budget and an opportunity to reach out to the choice riders while continuing to grow our dependent riders. So the goal is not to abandon, obviously, but it's to grow market share. We're operating with a budget significantly less than other regions of our size or somewhat larger, but still, we've got a significantly smaller budget. I think you guys have done everything you could do to squeeze every nickel from the agency. I mean, I think the exercise you've gone through over the last few years has been very, very positive. I know it's been stressful, but I think you all have done a phenomenal job of demonstrating that you can manage the budget and reduce, but now we've got to look at how we're going to grow it. I would agree with Mr. Thurman that we're going to have to find a way as this agency transforms and grows to grow its budget and lock it in. So there's no question. And then I would just ask that we have a very strong 10-year plan for increasing ridership. I liked your list of things that you're trying to do. One thing, though, that I would ask that we continue to explore, even if it's just I would like to see a lot of pilot projects. Even if they don't work, I think the pilot projects themselves, we learn from them. It's a great way to brand. I would rather brand through pilot projects than advertising. We advertise through our actions. But I would like to see a demonstration where people can know exactly how long if they have to wait for the bus to arrive. We had a consultant who came and talked with us about fixed transit, and I met with him last week. It was pretty interesting, but he talked about the importance of frequency, so obviously we want to drive more frequency. If you know the bus is coming and you don't have to, you can see it coming after one leaves and the other one's coming, then you don't worry about it as much. But if you're waiting there, even if it's 5 or 6 minutes, for us to have, there's got to be LED displays, more new apps, other things that can just tell a person when they walk up, it's going to be exactly 3 minutes or 4 minutes before the bus arrives. It really, I think, provides a sense of comfort, especially for riders, choice riders, who have options and would like to know. So anything we can do there. Let's see.
Any more comments, Mr. Sharp, or?
I'm looking at my
I
scribble.
know, I see you looking at your notes. I wasn't sure if you're just reading and you're ready to.
No, I'm just looking at my scribble. That's pretty much it. But again, I think phenomenal presentation, and I would close with, please, if you can go out and speak to the community, that would be very helpful, the two of you.
Okay, before we go on, I think Ms. Egan had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One point for our board, you will continue to see pilots and initiatives coming forward, focusing on doing better for all the riders. We are committed to doing better for the mom taking her kids to Head Start and going to job training, as well as doing better for the guy in the tie. We'd like to be doing better for all passengers, period, and not saying this passenger gets this and that passenger gets that. So as we come back to you, we're committing to make the service more accessible, easy to use, improving connections for all the different communities that we serve. And that's a voice you'll continue to hear from us.
The guy in the tie like me, my first is getting ready to go into college. I've got 2 more behind them. I would love to not have to have 3 cars in my family. And if I can find a way to cut one of those automobiles and save some money, I'd do it. So I'll be riding the bus. I just want a good service. Thank you.
Well, if we could have some climate change here, it would be a lot easier for guys in ties. Commissioner Merman's next. Anybody else after? Mr. Roche, and then Mr. Beckner. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will echo Commissioner Sharp's remarks. I think you have really made lemonade out of lemons here, really. You've squeezed every bit you can. You've done a stellar job. What I guess it goes back to, and since I've been on this board, the vision for the future, and the 5-year look ahead. When I was looking this over yesterday, and you're projecting shortfalls. That doesn't say vision. That says we're going into red ink. We're going into not good position. And I think we have to have serious conversations about revenue growth. I've said it from the beginning, and there are methods out there being discussed to help, talk about those type of things. Because HART can be the best it can be if it had more revenue. It's good now, but with ridership plateauing, I wrote down a couple things, cuts to enhance service, flat growth, your capital investment is down. Granted, you've added some service, but it's probably due to the fact that you're getting more property tax revenue. You're getting quite a bit, good bump in that, and you're able to do that. If you didn't have that bump in property tax revenue, I don't think this picture would look as good. Do you agree?
I agree. There would have to be a discussion on some of that
Yes,
fund
some
balance
cuts.
use and.
Absolutely. So I think we all have to acknowledge the information here about the opportunity that exists for HART in the future. The guys in ties, but the gals in heels, whatever. We've got to find a way. People, you know, the survey that our policy group did that showed it was 71% said never use, and somewhat to little use. If you look at the overall percentage, it was a lot higher than that. So the future for really increased ridership is not that great with this 5-year plan. The serious discussion about revenue growth has got to occur. I think the time is now, because we're kind of headed into a crisis. If you look at the out years, and you know how fast a year goes, you know, $2.7 million, even with the future planned revenue growth from property tax, it's just, you know, we're here. We're here. We've got to find ways to get this agency moved up to the top, because we can be the best transit agency in this whole state if we just stop looking at everything in a silo and making do with what we have, and squeezing more lemonade out of the lemons to try and make it work. It just, you know, you gotta face reality. I mean, I do it every day. You know, sometimes it doesn't. You know, Mike Merrill's back there, our county administrator. He knows we had some tough going for a couple of years, but we managed to make it. But we always looked to the future. We always kept our eye on the ball of what we wanted to achieve. And that's what I just encourage all of us to please do, and keep an open mind. Look at the future, look at where we want HART to go. Thank you.
Mr. Roche?
Okay, well, I really appreciate the presentation, as always. I think HART staff does a wonderful job in preparing this, and I almost feel like maybe I saw a different presentation, because I thought the outlook was very positive. I'm seeing a budget that puts out 16,000 hours of new service. We're shoring up our reserves, we're adding new employees, and we're giving them, everybody, bonuses and performance increases. So, you know, I think part of the distinction might be scope. You know, where do we see this agency? And so I think as far as the status quo, providing service to those who are dependent on it, increasing service and frequencies, that's all occurring. But what I think might be, you know, the hidden agenda here is maybe to, you know my background. I think the ultimate, I heard Mr. Sharp refer to a referendum, and I know there's been discussion about light rail. I think if we continue HART the way it's been going, keep the scope in perspective, I think there could be conversations about a referendum for the TDP. I think there are smart ways. Our Metro Rapid has definitely proven that we can do the same level of service for $25 million versus a $1.7 billion light rail, if you look at the statistics behind our Metro Rapid North-South. Actually, but that's my soapbox. I did have a couple of detailed questions about the budget that I'd like to go into. You mentioned in your capital discussion the Marion Transit Center canopy, that there were permitting issues and that we had to return some of our money back due to timing. I was wondering if you could perhaps expand a little bit on that.
Concerning the canopy?
Yeah, and well, what the permitting issues were, how much funding had to be returned.
All right. As part of the original design of the entire Metro Rapid system, it was always envisioned that there would be a covered walkway or canopy from the MTC proper out to the MTC stops at MTC Station 50, which is north of Marion Transit Center. there are a couple of issues. Permitting was the primary issue. The other issue was actually getting the original drawings that were submitted were rejected by the city of Tampa based on underground line issues. And I would argue that perhaps with everything else that was going on with Metro Rapid at that time, it wasn't pursued as well as it should have been to get it rectified with the city. We had a lot of other issues with fiber optics and installation of the TVMs and so on. So it was decided, we made the decision that if there's the one component of the Metro Rapid that we would forego and not complete would be the canopy. We felt comfortable that we would have additional funding from our own resources if we were to delay it 6 months to a year.
Okay, and what amount are we talking about?
About $400,000.
400,000, okay. Okay, and the other question I had was back to, let's see, apologize, I had one other. I guess the only other question was, you mentioned that there was an 11% projected increase in healthcare costs above the 5% increase.
It's a 6%
Or
above the
6% above the 5% for a total of 11%. Did something happen in the last year, or is this, not sure what spurred that increase?
No, we, over the last month or so, have been refining some work that prior staff had completed on the proposed budget, and are finding that perhaps there were a little bit too much of a conservative approach in some of the budget development. Sitting down with human resources and really understanding what our claims activity is today, we made the determination that 5% is great, it's conservative, but it doesn't really represent where we think what we will need to have as far as contributions by both the organization and by the employees going into next year. So we made a decision that going into the next budget cycle that you see, or in July and August, we're going to add another 6% to that healthcare, just to ensure that we have what we need. Plus, we will also have the fund balance designation for our self-insured plan.
And that was just my follow-up question, as far as, we had a significant amount of savings, above $1 million, I believe, by going to self-funding our health insurance. Is that still looking to be the right decision to continue to self-fund, or?
I mean, as of right now, the claims activity supports, if you look at other organizations comparable to us in size, not an expenditure, but an employee base, they're spending a lot more money on healthcare premiums than we are in our current claims activity. We are going to be looking at over the next year different ways to budget that healthcare. I've been in organizations before where right now we credit back the organization for unspent dollars in claims activity. I've been in organizations before that they retain that money in a fund and reapply it to buy down future increases in healthcare. So we're looking at trying to do that over the next year, reprogramming the way that we do business. So if we do perhaps budget a little higher than was necessary, that money would fall to fund balance. And if there was an increase the next year higher than what we had anticipated, we would take that leftover money and we would buy it down, either for the employees or for the organization component.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Beckner.
Thank you, and Jeff, always a great, thorough presentation. Going back to some of the questions I wanted to hit upon from our FGA meeting, and just in summary, the amount of increases in revenues and savings that we have total for this fiscal year is about how much then?
As far as the anticipated, in internal savings?
Over the last fiscal year. Internal, if you look at the increase in property tax revenue, I see is a little bit more than 891,000.
Right.
And so the additional revenues or the additional savings that we have accumulated over the last fiscal year is about how much then?
Well, from this fiscal year 14 is 1.2 million, and we're anticipating to be able to reduce total expenditures from 14 to 15 by $725,000.
All right. So, but we are increasing our operating budget by 2.376 million? And so that is made up by how?
It's made up based on the expected revenues that we're going to see outside of ad valorem. We're seeing an increase. I'll pull this back up. As much as I do give this, I don't have it memorized. So where our fare increases, we're looking at $452,000 with bus, an additional $381,000 with fares and passes on top of that. We are looking at, right now it's a minimum of $725. We're looking at, and I know my staff is here and they're gonna throw stuff at my back, but I'm anticipating about another $250,000 of savings going into 15 from the 14 budget.
So then how does that all balance out? When we got 2.376 million more that we're spending, and then what's the total amount of savings and revenues then?
Anticipating the additional $800,000 of ad valorem, it's almost a break even.
Okay.
But we feel very comfortable that the budget that we'll be able to provide you in July and August will have an overage of a couple hundred to $500,000 to be able to drop, just by continuously recycling through the budget and truing things up.
So the amount additional that we're expending, how much of that is reoccurring expenses versus one-time expenses?
$2.3 million.
So nearly all of that is reoccurring expenses.
It is. And it's based on, and the reoccurring would be the enhanced routes. That's recurring based on the fact that it's consistent in our TDP from year to year to year. The step increases will be reoccurring. Obviously at a higher rate, the 3% non-bargaining, it's reoccurring based on the fact that it will become part of the base, but it isn't a guaranteed 3% every year. So in 15 or 16, we could simply say, no, we're not giving you a 3% or 2% or any increase that year. But as far as the entire commitment of expenditure over FY14, I would agree that it is 90% recurring. And it is in that 5-year outlook, it builds upon itself each year.
And then one of the things that I raised and brought up in the FGA is the risk factor. That we continue, governments has gotten into this habit, the county is no different. You know, when the good times were rolling and we were getting in all this revenue, we spent, and a lot of it was on reoccurring revenue. And then when the party ended and property tax values went down, then with the hangover that we were faced with, we had to make a lot of difficult decisions. And what I want to make sure that we can prepare for is that we don't get in that same situation like we did before, that we conservatively plan for, and yes, we need to reinvest in our operations, but we shouldn't continue to spend every single dime that we get in additional revenue on reoccurring expenses. So the question that I asked at the FGA is, what is our risk factor? We talked about if property values continue to go up at 3%, but the analyst said that before, in the early years of 2000s, that property values were never going to go down, they're always going to go up. So what if they go down? What are we going to cut?
And in my experience with a prior county, I had the opportunity to work there during the height and then during the fall. And what we did during that time period of prosperity was had a county administrator who felt very strongly that a good portion of that increase needed to be tucked away to build a fund balance. So during the first 4 years of the downturn, 8 through 11, they were able to take that money that they had put away and be able to maintain as much service to the community as possible. What we would like to see over the next couple of years is a true balancing of being able to keep to the TDP, but at the same time, build this up as much as possible. So if that ever occurred, we would be able to not add more service necessarily during that period of time, but to maintain current service levels if only to siphon off some of that fund balance until times got better.
But am I missing something then? I'm not seeing the buildup of fund balances going forward. I'm seeing where it looks like we're going to be, I mean, if everything stays on the current course, that we're going to have to be taking monies away in the upcoming years. I mean, where is the buildup of the fund balance moving forward?
For next year, I do believe it'll be a minimal buildup, meaning I think that we will have more revenues coming in than we're expending once we balance everything out. But at the same time, we underspend every year.
Right.
And that isn't considered in any of the models. And right now, we typically underspend anywhere from 3 to 8% of our budget annually. So at the end of the year, we end up with more than we actually anticipated going into fund balance just based on underspending. And we're going to have the same program for FY15, is to have a very prudent spending program where we're on top of it. Every expenditure is evaluated and questioned, even if you approve it in the budget. So I'm not saying that we will have large amounts dumping into fund balance. It will be small pieces, but at the same time, we will be meeting our 90-day reserve and all of the other designations required. It's that undesignated piece that I think that we would really like to build, because that we could use for special projects or whatever discretionary issues that you would like. But as long as we're meeting that 90-day reserve, every time that we add a recurring expenditure, that 90-day reserve, obviously, it grows and eats up some of that unfunded component that we normally would have. If we were going to keep service flat over the last couple of years, that undesignated component, or the undesignated, would have grown. But as we increase our operating expenditures, our operating reserve increases exponentially. So every time we add service, that requirement grows and grows. So we're growing that component of fund balance regardless every time that we add service or add to the operating expenditure side of the house.
Right. Well, I'll just end with, like I said, I think you do a great job putting this together, but I'm going to continue to echo these concerns that I have. I'll take it from this agency into the county, any other agency, that we cannot continue to commit every single dollar that we get in revenue increases to reoccurring expenses, because this is going to wreak havoc for this agency and other agencies down the road when we get another downturn in the economy. We're going to be back to the same point where we've been before, where we have to make drastic cuts, cutting the service, cutting the employees, and that's where we should not be. And I just think a larger amount that we need to plan for is to make sure that we are still making sure that we're committed to providing the service. And as Commissioner Merman had mentioned, we need to expand and plan for the future. But part of that, I think we're going to have to step away from is our dependence on ad valorem for our main source of revenue and look at diversifying our revenue streams moving forward. That's a conversation for another day, especially as we plan for the future. But like I said, I don't want to see a repeat of what's happened when the economy turns sour again.
Thanks, Commissioner. Before I go forward, Commissioner Sharp, I had said that you were going to be after Posey because Mr. Melendez had asked for the floor also. I'm going to let him go first before you, if that's okay. Dr. Posey.
Thank you, Jeff. Just a couple quick questions. The difference between the 3% appreciation that you've budgeted and the 5.9, do you have any current plans for that? Can that be invested in service, or have you kind of got some other thoughts on where that goes, assuming the numbers that were released this weekend are sustained through the official release on July 1?
Part of the plan would be to negate the use of fund balance for balancing the budget. That's $400 and some thousand that we would utilize that for. And the other component would either drop the fund balance or be added to the service. The idea, once we found out we would get potentially an additional $800,000, would, one, negate the fund balance use and have the other money drop.
And just a couple comments on revenue streams. Almost any revenue source is subject to the economy. In some ways, property tax, while it certainly took an unprecedented hit recently, it tends to be a little bit more stable than sales tax in general, simply because you've got that 15-month lead time where you lock in what your revenue stream is for the future. The other thing that I hope for folks listening to this, where we talk about vision of the future and additional resources, while, you know, the board has different opinions on exactly how much more should be spent on transit, and what exactly that might be invested in, I don't think there's a lack of consensus on wanting to do more and improve transit service in the area. But I think the thing that's important to understand is the board hasn't consciously decided not to increase revenues. We're captive to, by the interagency charter agreements, to the revenue streams. We're at the maximum revenue sources that we have available and authority to execute at this point in time. So hence, it's going to be a broader community discussion about what additional revenues might enable the agency. To the extent that we can do things like we've done with rebates and leasing space and advertising revenues, et cetera, we've done those things and are continuing to explore those. But this board, as it currently sits, doesn't have authority to change the revenue side of things, and we've deferred to the appropriate entity for that, and obviously that's why the policy leadership group's going through the exercises that they're going through at this point in time. So just so folks understand, it's not like we're sitting on our hands and are reluctant to do more. We're capped at this level of revenue right now. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation and also doing a great job at your job. There's a nice confidence that comes with knowing that you and your staff and everyone do an excellent job, and it is appreciated. One thing I wanted to note, actually, before I begin, on the note of the funding for the televised board meetings and also the cameras that are now present. Can we just get it, maybe not now, but maybe before we leave today, just get a quick update on the procedures to view what is, if anything is available, like on
Meeting times and.
meeting times, well, yeah, on Hillsborough TV or wherever it's viewable after this meeting, or does it need to be?
I think that probably we could get one of our county commissioners to have HCT, is it HCTV is what it's called? Would give us an idea of when that schedule is.
Okay.
Because I agree, I don't know when the schedule is either. I know it's on their channel, but you know, only if I'm clicking through do I ever hear something from HCTV.
And is it rebroadcast, or is it available after the fact?
Rebroadcast, I believe, so.
No, I mean, is it available as an on-demand
And that's
service
another
to
question I think the
Okay.
county can answer at some point.
It's scheduled.
Okay,
And,
so,
I
so,
mean, you
okay.
can't- It's not like on.
Not like a channel, or like a YouTube link or anything, okay. And the reason I asked that is I think Commissioner Sharp brought up a good point about outreach to the community, and it would provide a vehicle for all of us if we could, refer to a link and say, hey, go to time mark 513 where we talk about, a budget presentation. I think, I would like to see us, within, budgetary considerations, have, and I think transparency, if you're going to do transparency, it should be full and not partial. So I think if we're going to have the cameras here, let's try to maximize that opportunity. And I think it'll help all of us, regardless of our position on issues. The question I had, Jeff, is on slide 35, on the pie, the fiscal year 2015 proposed capital revenue. And my question is, I wanted to ask if you could characterize, I know that the state grant portion is pretty small piece of the pie. How would you characterize the opportunity that we have to increase that slice of the pie? Not necessarily right now, but just moving forward into the 5-year plan, meaning how can we as members of the board work together with our partners, with staff to say, go out and say, how do we communicate needs, and then how do we, how much is there opportunity there to increase that slice of the pie? And if so, can you characterize by how much? I was thinking more on the state side.
On the state,
from the state
side, we absolutely can grow that, and we actually have been through a series of discussions with the Fairbox Regional Working Group, for instance. This shows $466,000 for next year, but that doesn't represent, we just received another $440,000 investment from the state of Florida for that program. And we actually, in my opinion, we have a very good relationship at the staff level with FDOT. And they engage us routinely on grant opportunities without us necessarily always going to them to ask for money, although we do.
Right.
But they are engaged with us. As a matter of fact, after this meeting, we'll be meeting with the acting COO on an opportunity that the state has asked us to help participate in, along with PSTA, on some technology testing for automated vehicle or autonomous vehicles. So there are opportunities that we have. So I would say that continued dialogue with FDOT, with the secretary, with the district secretary. I think, again, we have a very good working relationship with this district, and I think that has the ability to grow.
Great, well, thank you. And one of the things I wanted to do is make a commitment to start seeing how, as a board member, I can increase and help the organization if it's going out and talking to folks. However, I think each of us can communicate and try to advocate and basically try to, increase that slice of the pie and help you, really, is if there are any ideas or anything, please let me know. And so that's one thing I want to bring up. And on that note, I think we all have a poll, an email poll in our inbox. It's that regarding an upcoming workshop. The board members basically, to get together and talk about. I think Director Polzin mentioned it at the last board meeting, and so we're going to do a workshop. I plan to attend. I'm going to do everything I can to work around my schedule to attend, and I just want to encourage everyone. I think that'll be an opportunity for us to drill down on some excellent concepts that Commissioner Merman brought up on. We can talk at the 30,000-foot level, but I think we need to drill down and talk about, okay, where do we go to find funding? And then also, how do we assert what we want to do as a board? I think that's a good opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sharp?
When is the workshop?
I don't know, have they gotten the final schedule yet?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. We have heard back from 4 board members. We have not heard back. So we are still waiting responses from the other 9 members. At this point, it's looking like as early as this Friday afternoon or next Monday, either 9 to 11:30 or Monday from 1 to 3:30 are getting some return for board members. So the sooner we hear back from folks, the sooner we can end.
And do we have an agenda of topics for the workshop?
Not yet.
It's coming together right now, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, at this.
Well, we can make it about anything we'd like. So, I think that this workshop primarily is to look at the, again, as we have done in the past, the mission of HART in terms of what we want to do. Again, in my mind, the policy group will be a part of that, but it's not exclusively the only reason we're having the meeting. Commissioner Sharp, you have the floor, and then Director Bergen.
I'm glad we're having the workshop. I think this is very important. I would ask that our administrator be invited if there are any questions concerning the work of the policy leadership group. I think it's always helpful to have Mike explain. He can do it in a very calm fashion and oftentimes explain it in ways that I can't. But I hope that we're also talking about, as Director DeRoche discussed, the 2 visions. First, I agree with you. Things are looking good, in that you've done a very good job with less money. But there's still no question in my mind that this agency needs more revenue when you compare us to other agencies of similar size or who have a jurisdiction with a similar population. Our desire to reach a significant segment of the population that pays property taxes and doesn't use the service. And so I would love for us to reach out to the choice rider, and I'm looking to staff. I agree with Director Polzin that we don't have the power here, I guess, to increase the revenue or go for sales tax. But I think that when we look at the revenue that we need, there's no question it's going to have to be the sales tax. We heard it during our public hearing at the last board meeting, when a citizen stood up and said that it needs to be broader, it needs to reach out to those who visit, tourists and others, and we need a base where this agency can grow. So there's no question in my mind that we're talking a sales tax, and we're talking, I hope, November 16 at the latest. And I agree with Director DeRoche for looking at what services we can provide today. We're talking about buses for today. Now, that doesn't mean we can't plan for rail at some point in the future, but the focus obviously, if we're looking at the next 10 years, I mean, we had a gentleman from AECom who came and spoke to the board and gave a great presentation. He said even in the best of circumstances, everything worked perfect. You know, we're looking at a decade plus to have a fixed alignment up, but what the step towards a fixed alignment, and for those who are on all sides of that issue, is to demonstrate that you've got ridership along these specific alignments that would even qualify us. And so I would hope that we would be moving aggressively, and I would ask staff to be looking at, again, options for not the status quo, which if we follow the status quo means we're going to have a budget deficit in 2017, but a growth in our budget, which, by the way, and this is why I like the option, the idea of an expanded HART with maybe a broader mission. When we have more people who can drive their car using transit, we will, I think, over time, perhaps see perhaps a reduced need for road improvements. You're already starting to see that in some jurisdictions. So that will save the taxpayer money. Transit can save us money if we look at it holistically. So, and I think there's no way around, you know, when life is full of uncertainties and life is full of risk, but my God, you know, we've been blessed with the opportunity to be here. I thank God every day when I can wake up and alive. We ought to be going full forward and not hesitating, not holding back, not worrying about, I mean, plan for and be ready for the uncertainty. But as Commissioner Merman said, we got to be planning for the future, and I mean preparing for it and then doing it. So I would encourage us during that workshop to be thinking about how we can get more revenue for more bus service at this time, so that we can provide a greater service to the community, and I think over time save the taxpayers money with hopefully maybe even less road improvements.
Okay, Director Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Seward, impressive presentation. I don't know how you keep up with all this stuff.
It's an illusion.
So I have the following question. I think we've been here, meaning working in the HART overall process for about the same amount of time, about 3 years. Is that right?
Two and a half.
I think you'd arrived just a couple months maybe before I was appointed to the board. And I remember one of your first presentations, I was quite shocked at the out year reds. And so my question is this: in 2012, at about this time, we were working on the 2013 budget, would we have likely seen red figures for 2015 at that time?
$28,500,000.
So this whole idea of red is not really a new concept as we look at our out-year budgets?
No.
So in your estimation, then, do you think the 2017 $2.7 million red and the $5.3 million red in 18 may well likely dissolve into zero, as we're seeing in 15 now, so from 28 to 0?
I do.
Okay.
Again, this just represents a model, and we have done, since 12, the cumulative deficit in 12 was $28 million.
Okay.
Over the next 5 years.
So, you know, I was sitting here listening to a number of comments, and it's been really interesting this morning, all the feedback, different positions and so forth, but I just was questioning myself, did I not remember this right? I always say not having last, you know, the previous year's projection, so I just kind of wanted to clarify whether that was my imagination or if that was what was.
It was not your imagination. It did show a larger deficit.
Thank you for that clarity, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If I could just respond, I would say.
Hang on a second. We got a chairman here. You're not that, not at least not here. Commissioner Merman is next.
As our chair, he'll
And if you
always be
like,
our
Mr.
chair.
Sharp, we'll go ahead and get you, we'll get you in after Commissioner Merman.
I want to make this point about ridership in the county, because it's an untapped potential that we have. There are people that want service, and actually, the property tax revenue growth is probably coming out of the county that's not getting any service right now. So I guess the point I want to make is that this share of ridership between the city and the county, because I think it's like 65-35, somewhat, where the revenue split between the service in the city and the county, the reason we've got to discuss the revenue picture and expanding our ridership is because that's got to get to 50-50 as quick as possible. There are people in the county and going up to West Chase, Carrollwood. I mean, I can't tell you, New Tampa, they get nothing for their property tax dollar right now. And I really wanted to drive home that point, because that playing field's got to get leveled. We have got to do whatever we can to expand our ridership into the county and really find ways. And I think that's what I mean about the bigger picture. We can't just, I mean, I see all the new growth of what we're doing and the hours and everything, but primarily that's not helping the county. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that as we go into the workshop and really trying to get that Plant City. Look, I mean, I think we even eliminated the route, or there's still one route?
There's still one route.
One route. And Brandon, I mean, I made my point. Right, well, we're getting there. We're in discussions, but, you know, I think that we've just got to work on that.
Okay, before I go to Commissioner Sharp, did you still want to make some comments, Mr. Commissioner Sharp?
I was going to say, hope's not a strategy. I mean, I agree that we hope the budget deficit will go away, but I'm not counting on that. And it might go down, and we're going to continue to cut and scrimp, but we're talking about two philosophically different views for this agency. And, you know, and in my view, there's an opportunity to do exactly what Commissioner Merman's saying, which is to grow our ridership in those areas where in the past I've heard us have conversations saying, well, God, we're not even sure if we really want to grow it because we don't have the capacity to handle it. Well, that means we're going to need more buses, which means we're going to need to invest more. And we want more frequency, which is going to require more buses. So even if the budget deficit does narrow down to zero, which I hope it does, and I will give you full credit since you've been here, that we've watched the deficits go down, but I think we need to be planning for an aggressive growth strategy. I don't see any other alternative but to go for an aggressive growth strategy, to reach out to that market. A significant portion of our community have never used it, but would use it if it was readily available.
Okay, before I recognize Director Bergen, I'm going to say this right now, no more discussion about this. Let's get back on track about what we're going to do. If we're going to do a workshop, let's do a workshop. All right? I do not want to have a philosophical discussion, and literally left or right, about this particular issue right now. So please, anybody else who has any other comments about this, let us hold it until we have our workshop so that we can talk about it in a much more expansive way. But saying that, you'll defer to that? You know what? You are an incredibly intelligent man, Mr. Bergen. Now, has anyone else who has not spoken about the budget would like to speak now? Okay. Now, I will ask you a couple questions, and it actually has to do with the budget. On the streetcar maintenance portion of it, in terms of our capital budget, that amount comes from the federal government, correct? That is not an amount that comes out of our own capital budget that we may have, either from the county, from other sources. It is from the feds, correct?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
Secondly, you had made a comment about our capital budget for MTC station, some of the things along Marion. We have applied for a Tiger grant for about $10 million. If in some miraculous way, we receive that $10 million from the feds, how will that affect our overall capital budget going forward?
It would impact it to the point where we need to have a $2 million match for our Tiger grant. So we would have to go back into our capital program and reevaluate where we would find that $2 million match, or that match can also be by partners. So it isn't something that HART would have to go alone. We could go out, we could talk to the state, we could talk to the city, we could talk to Downtown Partnership, we could do all sorts of different things.
Right, so, and we can also go to private sources and some other places to
Correct.
partner in terms of some of the build out or some of the other parts of it, you know,
Yes.
correct? All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. And one last question. In terms of our cost, now you went to our fund balance draft reserve policy. We do have something in there concerning our disaster and cash flow designation. Is there a motto in there in terms of the increased cost for the use of buses when we do not want more vehicles on the roads, such as if there is a disaster, knock on wood? This is the second day of the beginning of hurricane season. Being in the insurance industry, I know that by heart. excuse the pun. Anyway, we know that sometimes because of the use of either National Guard or some other places, we're going to close off portions of streets, and sometimes they want buses to do that. Does that include any of those additional routes or costs or anything like that? Typically, we will dip into the reserve fund to provide that and hopefully get money back either from FEMA,
Correct.
state government, or so on, correct?
It's based on that assumption.
Okay. And if there is a total disaster, again, knock on wood, is there a number associated with that, or a number of buses that need to be used, or anything like that? And how do you go through that process?
That I can't answer. That would be a Miss Egan question.
And of course, she stepped out right when I was going to ask that question. That's okay. I appreciate that, because one of the things that has happened in the past with other transit agencies is that when disaster hits, they are put upon to provide even more transportation for those workers that are coming into a particular area because it's closed off or cordoned off because of security concerns, so that we're not going to have more cars come in here. We're going to have less. We're going to need more buses. That means we're going to be pressing the service, not only us, but PSTA and some of the other agencies that surround us. So now that Ms. Egan has walked back in, I'll ask her the question. Never leave the room. You never know what's going to happen. I was asking Jeff about our disaster preparedness and some of the things that happen when we are pressed into increased service because of a disaster, meaning that automobiles may not be able to be used or are going to be cut off from being used by National Guard or by State Guard. What is it that, how do we do a contingency in terms of the amount of money that we are going to have to expend on that from our reserves?
Actually, we'll have to get an update on our continuity of operations program, and I don't know if Michael has anything else on that. Usually, we end up doing it first and then coming back and sorting out the bills later, obviously. Most likely, we would face something for hurricane preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point at which our vehicles are pressed into service to start routing folks to hurricane shelters. Down at Nuts and Bolts, usually in that circumstance, we're already taking regular routes off the road because we cannot get to different parts of the service area. So as far as getting service out there, that would net out. And once we hit a certain amount of, I want to say 35 miles an hour on the winds, all our vehicles are off the road anyhow. But why don't we get an update on our COOP plans, and we'll bring that back to the board for more information.
Okay, I appreciate that, because, one of the things that we saw in New Orleans especially is that there were workers that were not able to show up to work because they were taking care of their own concerns in their own homes. Because of that, it caused a ripple effect throughout the rest of the community, which caused it to be even worse of a disaster than it could have been. The perfect storm literally happened there in terms of all the breakdowns from state, federal, and local government. And, I don't want to be in a position in which that happens. I know that we have been designated, or at least, the prediction is that we're going to have a light hurricane year. They've been saying we've been going to have a heavy hurricane year the last 5 years, and we haven't had any hurricanes. Now I'm afraid. So I just want to make sure that we're more prepared on that. And the last thing, in terms of our workshop, we'll figure out that date, figure out who's going to be invited and what we're going to discuss. Jeff, again, a terrific presentation as always. Your staff should be applauded for what they've done to help you make this presentation, and we appreciate it very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda, we have some action items. We have items 2A through, it looks like, G. I have a motion to move items 2A through G for approval. Do I have a second? We have a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, we have a chair's report. I am going to defer on the chair's report. I was not at the last policy leadership group meeting. Some of the things that we have discussed in the past, and I think that the next policy leadership meeting will have more meat on the bones. I will defer to Dr. Poseen to give us a kind of a.
There were several folks in the room that were there, but including myself. But it was a good discussion. And I think as we move to having a retreat, it'll be important for us to talk about that much more explicitly and the status of that and where they're at. I know the administrator was here earlier today. I think it is important to get him to brief us. Obviously, there's some very significant possible changes for the HART board that are going to require our attention. So I look forward to that. Those are, I believe, taped and available. As well as the, well, not only that, I think videotapes of those are available online too. So if folks haven't listened to those, I would encourage them to do
And
that.
I'm preparing to listen to them this week, so. And I will say, in terms of what we've talked about in the past concerning the policy leadership group, I think that we've been really wrestling with lots of different ideas, but none that have been put forward other than last week. We'll look and see what that looks like. I think that a lot of the discussion that we had today that was kind of budget related, but wasn't really, is going to come back up again during our workshop. So please be prepared, and I would suggest that all of us that are on this board be prepared with information that is provided to us by the policy leadership group, primarily because there are a lot of issues that concern us directly as board members and us directly as an agency that have been proposed by this leadership group. Regardless of where you stand on the particular issue, please be prepared to speak about it and not be a passive observer. I believe that in order for us to go forward, we need more participation, not only from this board, but from the community at large. We have not heard, and the policy leadership group was not prepared and created as a group with public input. So we need to make sure that the public understands that, the public participates in it, and I want all sides of the public to participate in it so that they feel that whatever we do going forward as this board or as the county or in any other board that comes out of this, that the public has had a chance to speak about these issues and come forward about what we're trying to do. That's all I have to say on our report. Ms. Egan, on your CEO report.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, my first issue was to talk about the schedule for the workshop, but I see that's been handled. So I believe the form is coming around for folks to check their availability, and we will get together as quickly as we have dates with more consensus. Lena will be in touch to try to schedule that. The other item I had is National Dump the Pump Day is coming up this month, and you have kindly authorized us to go ahead and issue proclamation. We'll be marking this with proclamations from the county, the city of Tampa, the city of Temple Terrace, also from the HART board. And our promotion this year is someone can get a day pass with a gasoline receipt. So get on the bus with a gas receipt. We'll trade that out for a day pass. This will be good on, I believe, most of our services except for paratransit, because that is a demand-based one. The intent to dump the pump is getting folks out of their car and onto transit, and putting our marketing push together with One Bus Away. Some of the newer apps that have just come out from the hackathon will have a presence, encouraging folks to give us a chance. Along those lines, we'd like to invite any board member who would like to try transit and dump that pump that day to let us know, and we'll be happy to go out there and make sure we take lots of pictures of you on transit. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And any of our board members that haven't participated in the past, please consider doing that. It's a lot of fun. And if you have been on our buses recently, they're very well run and very clean, and it's a testament to our staff. So, Ms. Davin, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Oh, you need your microphone, ma'am, before Lena jumps out of her chair.
To put together this workshop, are we going to have, I think Commissioner Sharp asked this, are we going to have some kind of an agenda? I mean, all I know so far is what I've read in the press, which has not been very extensive. And I haven't been attending the policy group meetings, so I really don't know the details. Are we going to have an agenda? Are we going to have a presentation? Are we going to be expected to take some action, or are we just going to talk? What are we doing at this retreat?
I'll answer that for you, Ms. Egan. The way I look at the workshop is as a presentation and informational, and not necessarily an action. Because the Leadership Policy Group was not a public board and was not involved with any kind of public input at the time, I think that we need, from our standpoint, to be that public board, to bring it forward and to talk about what was talked about in the previous 6 months. Without that, I think that we disserve the public by not providing what has been talked about. You're right, the press has done a very bad job of reporting
Well, I
on
didn't
this.
say that.
I did.
Well, I
No,
did not.
you did not. I take that back. I said that the press did a very bad job, except for our friend in the back, Mr. Mitch Perry, who's very happy because the Giants are in first place, you know, they have not looked at the deep aspects of what this actually means, not only for us as an agency, but for the county and for transportation at large. I, for one, think that we need to look at this even more and not make this as a quick decision. I think this workshop is just one part of what we should be doing as a board.
So this workshop we're preparing for is to discuss the findings and the proposal from the county, if it is a proposal.
Correct, and the
It- it
ramifications to,
It isn't for us to, because originally we talked about having a workshop to plot where we wanted to go in the future. So this is more of a discussion of what's been proposed. Am I right?
I would say that it could be both, because we, at the end of the day, may say, you know what, I don't think we want to go in this direction or that direction. I do think that it's just one part of what we should be doing as a board. There is a member, the county, who has said that they want to go in a different direction. They're an important member of our particular agreement, so we need to look at that seriously. That's the only reason to take a look at what it is that they're proposing, so.
But, Commissioner Sharp, there isn't actually a proposal yet.
Oh,
That
again-
will be at the end of June, where we see a plan for transportation.
Oh, and Commissioner Merman, don't get my words confused with a
I just want
particular.
to make sure that we're not
But there is no doubt that.
reacting to something that
No,
isn't
no.
exactly set in stone.
There was
That's the
a.
point I'm going to.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion in a lot of different directions, and that's kind of what I was trying to say during my chairman's report, which is, we've talked about a lot of things in the policy leadership group. It has not had any public input for any of the ideas that
Well,
were put
we-
forward. Hang on a second.
Okay.
And because of that, I think that if it is reported to the people saying certain things, we need to clarify that, and I think that having a workshop is a good way of clarifying that, because Mr. Merrill may come up to us and say, actually, you know what, we've figured out this is not workable, or whatever ideas we've come up with. He's come up with a lot of ideas, and the staff has come up with a lot of ideas, and I've met with staff, and I know you have, and, but there's nothing set in stone. Workshop is not something that we're gonna go forward on, other than to get the information, because the rest of the board members have not been part of that. I think it's important that they hear, because we're right near the end of that particular part of the policy leadership group. It's a beginning, not an end-all.
Right, okay, and if I can make a comment, we do have a schedule for public participation starting after we roll out a plan at the end of June. It's just that you have to build the plan so you can go out and talk to the public about it. But there is, it's an enormous public outreach that we're doing with all kinds of town hall meetings.
I apologize if I made it sound like you were not going to do any public outreach.
Yeah.
That was not my intention.
Okay.
My
I just
intention was
want-
is that
Bye.
we, as a HART board, because we're being talked about within the leadership group,
Right.
we have to put our group informed as to what's going on, and inform our public of the people we currently serve, and not necessarily for a plan for not only future services, but for other things that are not part of our mission now. So,
And you've done a great job, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that, and trying to.
you know you're on
take
TV.
in
I mean, you just
the
want to make sure, you can't go
information.
back on this.
No, but I think what is very important, that we've come to a point where we're starting to make decisions and putting plans and things together and ready to go talk to people. I would just encourage at the workshop that you, either Chip Fletcher and/or Mike Merrill, be in attendance so that you can really get the foundation of what we've been learning and gleaning for the past year. Because we've been doing this for actually over a year now, talking about where we want to go with transportation in Hillsborough County. I mean, that's really the basis of what our policy group is about, and what options are out there. and just exploring all the possibilities to build this 5, 10, 15-year transportation plan for Hillsborough County that works for everybody, not just a certain segment of the population. So I just, I guess I just want everybody to go into it with maybe a blank slate to try and just listen and see and get the information so that we can start to discuss it.
I think this is
Well,
an
I
important
appreciate
start.
those comments, because that is an answer to my question. My question was, what is the agenda going to be? Frankly, I don't think it serves us or the public for us to sit around and trade opinions at a workshop. I would like to hear what is being proposed. I would like to hear what is the factual agenda content, and then later we can talk about opinions. But I was anxious to know exactly what was going to be presented. If this is a proposal that's coming from the county administrator and county staff, then I would think we would want to have county administrator and county staff here to present what their proposal is.
Well, then, you know what, we may want to make the suggestion, based on the fact that the final format has not been finalized, we would wait for that workshop until after that period. And that may be the next step for us, as opposed to having him come before us, have another policy leadership group meeting in which something else has changed and he have to come back again. Now, that I would put it, I would open that up to a discussion about what that next step is going to be, because there's lots of different reasons why we do things, and one of the things that I want to make sure everyone knows, and again, it goes back to how do we communicate to the public what has been suggested. Again, the county is one entity that's a part of this group. It is not the entire HART. HART as a board, and we're going to get to our general counsel's report in terms of what those rules are, it has to make a decision based on our charter and our legislation, enabling legislation. So it's not just something that, if the county wants to do something, doesn't mean that HART is necessarily going to do what the county wants us to do. They're just one of those things.
I understand that, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
and,
But
go
my
ahead.
point was that perhaps it would be more productive if the HART board raised their questions and gave the county leadership feedback before they go into their final meeting. So I did not want to infer in any way that I was suggesting we postpone this workshop.
Okay.
Not
no,
at all.
I
think it would be-
apologize, I was inferring that, actually, because.
I did not infer that. I just think it would be more productive if they made a presentation, the people who have formed this up, if they made a presentation, and then this board could make some perhaps productive comment to them.
Yeah, and that was my intention. Mr. Roche.
To play off of that, there was actually some actions that were done, as I recall, at the, what I've heard, that there was a vote to change, reconfigure the board, and that was already voted on. So in furtherance of having it in the shorter term rather than the longer term, I think, we would like to have a discussion on that issue
Okay,
as well.
and I will say that I was not in attendance at that meeting. I do not think that there was any representative from HART at that meeting that voted in favor or against that proposal. So again, it's a procedural matter more in my mind than anything else, because you're not the representative of HART at the meeting, no. I mean, again, there is only one person that can speak for the HART board, and that is the chair or the interim CEO. It is not an individual board member. Again, I don't do anything unless the board has allowed me to do it. I do not put my opinions out there in terms of myself as HART only. If I have an opinion as a city councilman, I put that forward, and I make sure that people who know that it's from a city council perspective and not from a HART board perspective. Again, we are only looking at what it is that was discussed, and so that they can make the presentation to our board in totality, so that we are not in any way misinformed about what was talked about at the policy leadership group. Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make one comment, since I brought up the workshop earlier in the board meeting today. One element that call it an expectation that I had in mind was kind of respects the fact that there's a dialogue going on outside of HART, but I definitely have an expectation that as a board, we will talk about where we want to go within our sovereign, right of authority. That's important to me at the workshop, in addition to everything else that's happening.
And if I may, that goes to the very heart of what we're talking about, which is that if a board member, and I should say a group, which is the county, is making a decision that says we want to change our HART board or our HART mission or our HART as a county commission or as a leadership board, it doesn't really matter. They have that right to say that, and I think that we should discuss it because they are a part of HART. That's a wholly,
I agree.
and that's a wholly different thing than saying, one or the other. We, as a board, may decide we do not agree with what has come out of the leadership group and say we reject that. That's a whole nother issue, and that's going to be a whole nother discussion if that's the case. Or we may say it's the greatest thing that we have ever seen, and we want to go forward. But that is HART's role. It is not the county's role. And that's all I wanted to make sure everyone knew, that that group, although it strives very hard to make sure that everyone's involved, it's not the same as our board, which is a public board that's authorized to have these meetings and to run a bus system. So it's a little bit different. Mr. Sharp, you have something to say?
Yeah, we had the mayors, as well as the mayor of the city of Tampa, who attended the meeting and voted in favor. But I think that it was the mayor of Temple Terrace, Mr. Chalora, who really, I thought, eloquently kind of summed up the sentiment of the board, which was that, and Mr. Merrill himself, when he spoke earlier, looking at precedents where there have been other organizations which have had to go through changes as a result of a broader mission. He talked about the Homeless Coalition and such. And in this case, the mayor of Temple Terrace really wanted to make it very clear, because it was my concern, and I spoke with Mr. Merrill about this afterwards and over the weekend as well. That's why I wanted him here today even. First, that there'd be a very clear understanding of what it was the policy leadership group is trying to do. And that this is in no way, and the mayor of Temple Terrace was very emphatic about this. I thought his statement was really, I wish we had a copy of it to hand out. Very laudatory of the HART board, talked about the fact that they in no way wanted this board to take away that the policy leadership group was in any way being dismissive and or saying now you need to go away, but really what we're all feeling, which is that the mission's only growing, that there needs to be more collaboration, more opportunities for HART to provide service, a better service with more resources. And so we want, I think it would be very helpful, and I absolutely am 100% in agreement with Director Davin, that Mr. Merrill and for that matter, Mr. Fletcher, who I've spoken with extensively about what we can and can't do as a policy leadership group, to have a positive conversation. There's no need, I don't believe at all. I've heard nothing from any conversation at the policy leadership group that would in any way, I think, cause us as a board, at this time at least, to receive what they're suggesting in a negative fashion. And so to have Mr. Merrill, to have the attorney, to be able to explain what we're trying to do so that we can work in a collaborative way, which we've done in other instances, so we can, at the end of the day, provide a better service with more resources to more people, but while continuing to provide extensive service to our existing clients. If you look at where we've been analyzing over the last year, it's in those areas where HART provides service now, but it's at a 30-minute frequency. And we want to shorten that time down. So it's more resources for the people who are using the bus service today. But I think it would be important to have the meeting next week and to let Mr. Merrill speak, so that if there's any concern, this board can express it, so that Mr. Merrill does have time, because I think he really does want to adjust. He does not want to go back and have war. I mean, even if we could, take over, we don't want to do that. I mean, that would be very, I think.
If I could interrupt you, please. I don't think anyone is talking about that. All we're talking about is we have a role to play.
Absolutely.
And we just want to make sure we get the information, period.
That's what I'm saying.
This is not a war, this is not an adversarial relationship. You, as a duly elected member of the county commission, have a role as a member of this board. You also have a different role, as I do, as an elected official to my board. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what's the process, if there's any, that's gonna go forward. Having the workshop is only gonna report that, not adversarially, just, we have to have an information about what's gonna happen. So,
Well, I
if
think we should
anything.
do it.
So, that's, and I agree with you, I don't have any problem with that. Before we go on, aren't you happy that you decided to step in for David Smith today? I don't know what he has on the general counsel's report, but please share with us what you have.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Campbell McLean from Gray Robinson. I'm here today on behalf of Mr. Smith, who was unable to be here, but he wanted to send his greetings to all of you. The only thing we need to report is that obviously with the discussion that we've had today, that is the penultimate issue, the main issue that's before us, and we are preparing a review and summary for this board that we will be prepared to discuss at the workshop. Mr. Smith is working directly with Mr. Fletcher to understand some of the parameters of the proposal.
A very good discussion.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We have, of course, our committee reports that are in the back. Have any other reports, any member of the public that would like to talk now about any general concerns before HART, please come forward. I see no one. Any old business or new business by our members? I see none. If that is the case, Madame, please.
This will be real quick. Since we're talking about budgets at this meeting and spending and expenditures,
You usually say
I would
that.
like, I happened to cross the Orange Orlando Expressway Authority's website, and they have a really good tab there. It just says checkbook. And you can click that and you can get the entire check register, how much was spent, who it was spent, who it was written out to. I would really like to see HART do that as well, and maybe get a report back next meeting as to what that might entail, if it's something that we could do, how quickly, that kind of thing. But you know, a good place to look would be, again, at the Orange Orlando Expressway Authority. And I just think for the sake of spending and transparency, it'd be a big help.
I hope that's not the same authority that's been having problems with
Yes,
indictments.
they
and so
are.
on.
In fact, that's what led me to there in the
Yeah,
first
well,
place.
maybe money transparency is not their problem, it's something else.
Right.
I believe you're offering that as a motion? To
Yeah.
get the staff to come back to us in the next meeting?
Yes.
Mr. Bergen? Okay, and second, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then we're passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Roche. Mr. Seward, you have
And that's
something
the
else to
fastest
add?
motion that's been put in motion. We are actually working on a financial transparency project where all of our invoices, checks, contracts, everything will be available, emulating the work that I did in Sarasota County for financial transparency, where an individual can just go on our website by category and be able to pull up by month and history, just like your bank account, of where we're writing our checks to, and everything will be out there. It's kind of not real high on the priority list, but we are working on it, and absolutely want to get something set up in the next fiscal year.
Boy, you got a fast response.
Thank you, wow. You know, you're gonna have to make more motions from now on. If there's nothing else before this board, we are adjourned. Thank you.